You too. Ready to proceed in all three matters. Opening statements, Mr. Kester.
Your Honor, because this is a bench trial, I do not have a long opening statement. I think the court will hear plenty of testimony over the next 3 days concerning what's going on. But what I do want to point out is why we are here and what we believe the law is pertaining to these three cases. And we will talk about this as if it's one case, but we understand there are three petitions before the court. And we believe that MCL 700.1208 paragraph 2 is what controls in this matter. And what that paragraph says is that an individual whose death is not otherwise established under this section or section 1207, and those sections are for accidents, and I know the court has seen cases like that before. I'm going to continue on with the MCL, who is absent for a continuous period of 5 years during which he or she has not been heard from, and whose absence is not satisfactorily explained after a diligent search or inquiry, is presumed to be dead, which means we are beginning this case with a presumption that the three children are deceased. The individual's death is presumed to have occurred at the end of the period, at the end of the 5 years, unless, and this is why we are here today, there is sufficient evidence to determine that death occurred early. It is our position that the evidence that we are going to present to you, Judge, is that Andrew Alexander and Tanner Skelton died on or about November 26, 2010.
I just briefly wanted to say that I am joining in the petitioner's request and am in support of the relief requested. Thank you.
All right, your first witness, Mr. Castleberry.
Your Honor, we would call Chief Larry Weeks.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Chief Larry Weeks.
Chief Larry Weeks. Okay, come on up.
Please raise your right hand. Sir. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God?
I do.
Good morning, Chief. How are you?
I'm doing okay, sir.
I understand you're a little under the weather today. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
I want you to understand, I know there are TV cameras here, but what's important is that the judge can hear what you're saying. If I don't say something loud enough, clear enough, or you don't understand something, stop and ask me to repeat it, and we will make sure you understand the question, okay?
Yes, sir.
Also, I know you brought a water bottle with you. I understand, we understand you're not feeling well, so if you need to take a break, also just let us know and we will get a break for you, okay?
Thank you for that.
Please state your name for the record.
Larry Weeks, LARRYWEEKS.
And where are you employed?
I'm currently the chief of police for the city of Eaton Rapids.
How long have you been the chief there?
Just over 11 years.
11 years. Where'd you work before that?
I was a chief of police for the city of Morenci.
Morenci, Michigan, and Lenawee County.
Correct.
And what training and experience do you have?
In total, I believe I have approximately 36 years of law enforcement experience. I've been trained in a variety of different investigative techniques, basic law enforcement principles, professional training. I've attended with the Eastern Michigan University School of Police Staff and Command and the FBI National Academy.
When did you go to Quantico?
2013.
2013. All right, so you were working in Morenci in 2010, is that right?
That's correct.
And did you have occasion to get to know the Skelton family?
I was acquainted with them. When you work in a community the size of Morenci, approximately 2,200 people, you become acquainted with lots of people in the community. I lived in the community, raised my family there during the time I was there. So I was very connected to the community. So I was acquainted with them. I often saw Tanya and her family out at different locations. Yeah.
Did there come a time around in September of 2010, that you maybe had a little more contact with the Skelton family?
Yes, in September of 2010, I received a message from the police department that Tanya had called. She was concerned because she relayed to me, once I met with her, she was concerned that there was something going on with John in the sense that he had picked up the kids from school and had told the staff member there at the school that he was taking them on vacation. She told me that the staff member told her that the interaction seemed odd. His demeanor was odd, and that he was taking her children to Florida. We spoke about that. I did some quick legal queries, and it was my assumption that if his intent was to deprive the mother of the children, he was violating the parental kidnapping law. I was able to reach out to John by telephone eventually and threatened him with arrest if he did not come back. At the very least, sit down with Tanya and have a conversation with her about where the kids were going to be and what the whole plan was.
Just a formality, but do you recognize the petitioner in this matter?
I do.
And is that the Tanya that you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
And she's sitting in the courtroom to my right?
Yes.
So it's your understanding in this September incident that were they divorced at that time?
No, but in the meeting that I sat in on when he did return, it was clear that they were having marital problems that they discussed. John very much wanted to move his family to Jacksonville. He expressed that there were more job opportunities there. His family was located there. He believed it would be a better place for them to continue, their family's life there. Tanya was concerned about having to relocate her family, generally located in the Morenci area. And having been a registered sex offender, she was concerned that relocating to an unknown community and what the community may perceive of her,
right.
Where in Morenci, she indicated that she was able to live a comfortable life with people knowing that.
Gotcha. So you said you called John. Was he in Florida when you called him? Do you know?
I don't know specifically where he was at the time that I called him, but he did return. I don't want to testify to a time, but he did return with a reasonable amount of time.
Chief, we understand that all this happened 15 years ago. I appreciate you not guessing, and we don't want you to guess, but we also understand that some of this has been a long time ago. So if we have to, if you just tell us the story as you remember, okay?
Yeah.
So do you know what ended up happening? Did he end up taking kids to Florida? The kids to Florida?
At the conclusion of the meeting, John took Andrew and Alexander with him and Tanner. To my recollection, I understand behind the team.
Okay. Do you know if there was anything more done with that?
I urged both parties to seek resolution in civil court so they could be more clarify their custodial matters on paper. Because I in that position, I really lacked any authority to take more action than what I did.
Right. Is it your understanding, though, that a judge in Florida ordered the kids to come back to Michigan?
Yes, it's my understanding that a judge ultimately ordered John and the children to come back, and then the proceedings continued here in Lenawee County.
Okay. And that's civil proceedings you're talking about,
Correct.
A divorce, correct?
My understanding was just the custodial matters, not
Okay.
divorce.
So after the September incident, you became a little more familiar with their family. Do you remember what your next contact was with the family?
I don't know that it was my contact, but I believe I reviewed an incident report regarding Officer Ryan Hiller's response to
Okay.
the house.
And what do you remember about that?
I believe it was on the 21st of November. Officer Hiller documented in a report that he submitted to me that it was Alexander that called 911 out of fear that he could not find his father in the house, and felt that he might be in some sort of danger.
So the three children, in which one is Alexander? Is he the oldest, the middle, the youngest?
He's the middle boy.
So he's the middle child. And you say that he called 911?
I believe that's accurate.
And he called 911 because he couldn't find his father. Is that correct?
Correct. Is my understanding. They didn't know where he was at.
And do you know, did the police respond?
According to the report, Officer Hiller responded and made contact with the boys and John. And John indicated in some way that, he had stepped away and had informed the boys of where he was at, and alleged there was just some sort of confusion. And then, according to the officer, everything was fine. And
So is it fair to say that if the children were in danger, they knew to call 911?
yes, from my opinion, I thought that was fairly savvy of a 7-year-old boy at that time to be alert enough and aware enough to make that call in that situation.
After that, you said that was November 21st. What was your next contact with Skelton?
On November 26th, I was at home. I received a call in the evening from Officer Hiller. He indicated he was at the Fulton County Medical Center in Waseon, Ohio. He explained to me over the phone that he had what I would describe as a disturbing situation. I explained that John was there with an ankle injury and was acting extremely erratic. He was having a difficult time getting specific information out of him as far as what had transpired and led him to this point at the hospital. He explained that the whereabouts of John and Tanya's children, Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner, 975, were unknown at this point, and he was concerned about their safety.
Did he bring up the name Joanne Taylor?
He went on to explain that the best he could get from John was that they were with a woman by the name of Joanne Taylor, and Joanne's husband his name was Mark, and he was a pastor.
Okay. Did Mr. Skelton say anything about suicide or trying to kill himself?
Yes, and that it was implied that's how he injured his ankle, and it was his intention to harm himself. Ultimately, secured a ride from a family member after the failed attempt.
So it's fair to say he failed to kill himself. But your understanding.
That's what he described.
So then what did you do next? My notes, I have that you went to the Morenci PD to meet with Officer Hiller. Is that accurate?
Correct. I explained to him that once he cleared the hospital, we would meet up at the police department and make some decisions about next steps. He explained to me that he had been in contact with family members. They'd been over to the home. Family members had already forced entry to the home in an effort to look for the children. And that the house is in a complete state of disarray. And I wanted to look at the situation and assess it myself. So we went over to the house again.
What did you see there?
I agreed that the house was in disarray. Glass and cabinets had been broken. Electrical cords to the appliances had all been cut. There was a Bible laying on a table in the living room with a verse circled. Officer Hillard informed me that a notebook had been turned over to him by a family member that had been located at the residence, that based on the way he read it, he believed to be a suicide note. I read it. I concurred.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Chief, I just showed you something, and we're not marking it as an exhibit at this point, but you just brought up the suicide note. And
Okay, I can't. Somebody's ruffling some papers. I can't.
Oh,
get
yeah,
them.
sorry.
I think it's the witness.
Our black microphone, the bigger square black one, is the one that's recording. So just maybe try not to,
Give me the backup.
the paper sometimes get on the microphone.
Judge, thank you.
That's okay.
Chief, I just handed you 4 pieces of paper. And do you recognize those 4 pieces of paper?
I do.
And is that the note that you're speaking of?
It appears to be yes.
Yes. And you said you read that note.
I did.
Was there anything remarkable about it that you remember?
Not at this moment.
Okay. Do you remember that it was a suicide?
Yes.
And next, may I approach the witness again, Your Honor?
May.
I'm not gonna have you read it. Chief, next, did you meet with a Charlene O'Brien?
Well, there was one additional thing we found in the home that I wanted to mention as
Okay.
well. There was, I'll thoroughly explain, when he entered the home, there appeared to be a noose hanging from a 2nd-story balcony.
Okay.
And he had moved the noose because it was tied to a door handle. And when he needed to clear the house to look for the children, he had to move the noose to be able to get in the room. But he restaged it for me to show me what it looked like.
And that was Officer Hillard.
Yes,
So the house was in a complete disarray, destroyed.
correct.
There were broken glass, you said,
Yes,
broken cabinets.
yes,
And then what appears to be a noose and a suicide note, right?
yes.
Next, did you meet with a Charlene O'Brien?
Once we completed our, my assessment of the information there at the address on Congress Street, we returned to the station.
Let me stop you for a second. When you say Congress Street, is that the Skelton home?
Yes.
Okay.
112 East Congress Street.
Thank you. I don't think we ever put that in. Thank you.
We returned to the office, began discussing next steps. While we were there, excuse me. Apologize. While we were there, Charlene O'Brien, who I believe is John's aunt, knocked at our door, the police department. She presented me with a suitcase that had a laptop in it. She explained that John was on the computer often. And she said that John earlier in the day had come to her house and Lisa Kern's house across the street from hers and dropped these items off, along with other personal items, including the boy's toothbrush. He gave them to her, gave these items to them.
So you're saying that you were told that John Skelton went to Charlene O'Brien's house and Lisa Kern's house, and this is November 26, 2010.
Correct.
And do you know what time he went there?
I believe it was around 7:15 in the morning. I'll double check my notes.
So about 7:15 a.m. Now, November 26th. What day is that? Do you know what day that was? Was it Thursday or Friday? Do you remember?
It's a day after Thanksgiving. It was a Friday.
Okay, so we're talking about Black Friday.
Correct.
Now, in this suitcase that he dropped off, you say he dropped off items at 2 separate locations?
It's my understanding.
And what's the proximity of these 2 locations? Are they close together?
They're somewhat kitty corner from each other in a rural area outside of the city.
Can you see from one place to the other?
I don't recall if it's tree covered or not, to be honest with you. It's been too long.
But he left. Apologize. Bluetooth is good. You say he left toothbrushes, children's toothbrushes?
Yeah, we believe them to be the boys' toothbrushes and coats, and again, other personal items.
So the children's winter coats and their toothbrushes, he left them at his aunt's house, is what you were told.
Correct.
And those items were delivered to you, correct?
Well, at this point, she only delivered the laptop, the items that were in the suitcase, which was a laptop. There were other items that, in a follow-up interview and contact with members of our investigative team, had whether we collected the rest of the items. That
But she came to tell you that those items had been left that morning
Yes.
at around 7 a.m. Is that accurate?
Yes. When she gave me the laptop, she said that I could do whatever I needed to do with it. Anything that would help potentially locate, the boys and bring them home.
So at this point, it's your understanding that these 3 children are missing and there's no plausible explanation as to where they're at. Is that accurate?
Yes, particularly after speaking with, a relative of John's, who indicated that, to the best of her knowledge, the boys weren't with any family members here in the area on his side. So having had Tanya and family members, from that side of the family indicate they weren't there with anyone there, and of course, anyone on John's side of the family, that was making our concern grow even more.
Are you familiar with the term exigent circumstances?
I am.
And would you agree that exigent circumstances are when there's something so important that you have to take action to try to, for safety, right? And so you did look in that computer, right?
Yeah, being fearful for the life of the boys, I started the computer up, and it did my novice understanding of electronics, as it relates to handling that device. I did some cursory searching and was able to find what appeared to me to be that email addresses set up for one Joanne Taylor were accessed by that computer.
Gotcha. So you could see that an email address for Joanne Taylor had been accessed from this computer owned by John Skelton?
Yes. And then later on in the investigation, once a more thorough forensic analysis was done, we were able to link the email address being created at the IP address commonly used by John. So that more directly linked it to him.
So I know we're both novices when it comes to computers, but we do understand. Tell me if I want to know if you agree with me on this. The IP address is for the location of where the computer is located, right? Is that accurate? How it's connecting to the internet?
Yeah, it's kind of like a physical address for electronic device.
And so what you discovered through this forensic examination is that the email account for Joanne Taylor was created at the same location this computer's been used before. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And is that address, physical address, Congress Street in Morenci?
Well, the IP address is known to be used at that address of 112 Congress Street.
Thank you. So in other words, the email account for Joanne Taylor was created more than likely at Congress Street in Morenci, Michigan.
Yes.
Now, I know that Officer Hillard had spoken to Tanya and what time, do you remember what time the children were supposed to be returned to her on November 26, 2010?
I believe it was 3 PM in the afternoon.
And where, if you can remember, did John say the kids were? Or who were they with?
Well, as I indicated, he had told Officer Hiller that they were with this Joanne Taylor. He had also communicated that with Tanya via text message that the children were going to be late and that the kids were with a Joanne Taylor.
Now, this is the same Joanne Taylor that you just testified that through a forensic evaluation is determined that an email address for her was created at John Skelton's home.
That's my understanding, yes.
And there's never been any discovery of a Joanne Taylor.
No, in fact, as I believe I'll explain later, but as our team grew, an investigative team grew, we had one team member that was assigned specifically just to do that, to attempt to locate the Joanne Taylor that was described. And no such person was ever discovered.
And in fact, did you learn through part of the FBI's investigation that John Skelton even questioned whether he was Joanne Taylor? Questioned himself, is that accurate?
That's true.
And made statements to the FBI that he needed to know 95% sure whether he was a child killer or not, because he remembered them being with Joanne Taylor.
That's true.
Now, at some point, you're going through this. The children are missing. You have a laptop. You have their winter coats, their toothbrushes. How are you feeling? Are you worried about them?
Yeah, we had, after Charlene O'Brien's visit, we began distributing more broader, what we call BOLs and law enforcement, be on the lookouts for Joanne Taylor, any alleged vehicle description we had, anything like that. We've done some preliminary searching through the law enforcement information network to try to locate anybody with a, that possibly might match that. We just were running into dead ends. And it was clear the case was going beyond the resources that I had at the Morenci Police Department. And certainly due to the apparent imminent potential threat to the boys, I made a decision to contact the Michigan State Police Operations Center and initiate an Amber Alert.
So after that, you had other agencies helping.
Yeah, shortly after that, as a matter of protocol, my understanding now, and shortly after that process is initiated, I received calls from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Michigan State Police, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. All three organizations advised they were willing to come assist with our investigation, ask brief details, and my response to all of them was yes, happy to have your support, and dispatch personnel to our location to assist.
So you just named three organizations. You named the Michigan State Police and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which I think we all are kind of familiar with, somewhat, at least we know who they are. But what is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children?
The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, I don't know the year it was created. His name escapes me now. I was well known from crime shows now, but his son was murdered many years ago in Florida.
John Walsh.
John Walsh, thank you, sir. John Walsh spearheaded the creation of the National Center on Missing and Exploited Children, and that program assists with a variety of different things related to missing children, age progression photos. They can analyze photographs of abused children from all over the country and potentially link them together. They have investigative support that they can render. They had what they call I believe an ATOM team member. It was on the scene with us, assisting us. And at one point we traveled and met with them and did a brief presentation on this case to a variety of investigative experts, psychologists, and presented our case there to them.
And so they got involved.
I'm sorry again.
Oh, you're okay. Do you need to take a break?
No, sir.
Make sure you drink your water. Stay hydrated. So the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children became involved in this case on November 26, 2010.
Correct.
And to the best of your knowledge, they're still involved today.
Yes, I've seen the age, I'm not actively involved in the investigation anymore, but I have seen over the years the release of the age progression photos.
So I'm glad you brought that up. When you say age progression photos, even back in 2010, once this Amber Alert gets issued, there are pictures sent out of what these children look like, right? You have to speak.
Sorry, yes. We created our own missing flyer initially, but once they got involved, the flyer evolved.
And even, I think you said you left Morenci, was it 2012? When did you leave as chief?
Late November 2013.
2013. So every year on the anniversary of this, did you have flyers created?
To my knowledge, they do that as a matter of a course of action.
You say they, who you?
The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
But did you see those photos distributed?
Well, they have a very robust distribution network, so much greater than I do. So they were good at getting that out nationally.
Didn't you also do a roadside check of vehicles just to ask questions of if they'd seen the children?
Yeah, a year to the date, and we did it approximately the same time that we believe that John had potentially driven through an area, Morenci Road at 127. We didn't know for sure he'd driven through that particular intersection. We really were just based on where we believed he started and where we knew his cell phone had traveled. It was possible he passed through that intersection. So we partnered with the state police during the time of day that the morning that we believed he could have driven through there. And as cars drove through, we passed out flyers, asked if anybody had potentially seen his vehicle. Excuse me. Unfortunately, we weren't able to develop any leads out of that.
But it's fair to say, as long as you worked in Morenci, you never stopped looking for these children.
That's correct.
And you never found any sign of life of these three children, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, let's get back to the laptop. Talk about Skelton's internet. When I say Skelton, John Skelton, his internet activity under the exigent circumstances. There was the Joanne Taylor email account. Were there other accounts?
Yeah, there was a Cafe Mom account.
What is Cafe Mom?
It is I don't know if it still exists, to be quite honest, but it was a website, like a blog. It was for moms to support one another, coordinate, recipes, play dates, share aspects of child raising, whatever they could do to support moms.
Okay. So you found a Cafe Mom account on there?
Yeah, it appeared that at least from that laptop, an account was surreptitiously created in an effort to communicate with Tanya by John.
So it appears that John Skelton created his own Cafe Mom account.
Yes, pretending to be someone else.
And he was using that account to talk to Tanya's Ubers?
He was communicating with her through the messaging system.
And you said surreptitiously. In other words, he didn't tell her it was John.
Not to my knowledge.
Was there also a Yahoo account?
Yes.
And now all of these accounts through this investigation were determined to be from the same IP address. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. Was there also a search of cellular telephone movement for Friday, November 26th?
There was, based on the search warrant of John's cellular records, at approximately 4:13 a.m. on the 26th, tower information puts the phone in the vicinity of his home.
Now that's Congress Street.
Yes.
Okay.
At approximately 4:29 a.m. The phone is on the move, appears to be on the move away from the home.
Okay.
At approximately 5 a.m. his phone hits off a tower near Pioneer, Ohio. And then 5:01, 5:04 a.m. the phone hits off the towers again near Lazy River Campground in Ohio, Williams County.
Okay.
Then at 6:46 a.m. the phone appears to be back in the proximity of his home.
So it's your understanding that through whatever visitation arrangement that Tanya and John had the three boys on Thanksgiving. I was supposed to deliver them to Tanya at 3 p.m. on the 26th. Is that correct?
It's my understanding, I don't recall this moment that was dictated by court order, but that was certainly an arrangement the two of them had.
Okay. And so the time that you're talking about, you just went through 4:13 a.m. on November 26th. So this is time that the three children were with John Skelton. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, and to your knowledge and through your investigation, there was no one else at the house, was there?
Well, I guess I would have to back up. It's my understanding the children were with him. At some point, they are no longer with him. I guess I don't know for sure, when that.
Right, but what I'm saying is, that from your investigation, you would agree that that was his visitation time,
Correct.
correct? And during his visitation time, when Tanya is not there with him, and to your knowledge, no one else is there, correct?
Correct.
He left his home at around 4:30 in the morning, correct?
Correct.
And he came back sometime around 6:45.
Correct.
And during this time, or at least his cell phone did, right?
That's correct.
Because that's what you're tracking is the cell phone.
Well, we did speak to a witness, Christy Schaefer, who indicated that she'd gone by John's house about 5 a.m. and had stated that she did not see his van at that location. So his phone is not at the residence and the van is not at the residence.
Thank you, Chief. And I know that it's 2025 today, but this happened in 2010, right?
That's correct.
And what happens in 2010 on Black Friday?
Well, people-
Generally with
yeah,
stores.
people are out shopping.
Okay, so it's not unusual for someone to drive by the house at 5 a.m. on Black Friday.
That's correct.
And it's your understanding that that person just noticed the van wasn't there. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
And who was that?
Christy Schaefer.
So we know that based on the cell phone, that the cell phone left at 4:30 and did not return and went into Ohio, hit off towers in Ohio, and came back to Congress Street around 6:45, correct?
Correct.
We also know that a family member drove by the house around 5 o'clock in the morning and the van wasn't there.
Correct.
So it makes sense that the phone and the van were together
It'd be reasonable to surmise that.
and somebody's probably driving the van, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I know this was a very large investigation, Chief, and I know that it's my understanding that when there are large investigations, many agencies working together, you have briefings. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You have meetings with all the agencies and put a plan together?
We met regularly, dynamics changed. We often had impromptu discussions about what the next steps were.
But part of that is so that you're all not doing the same thing, right?
Correct.
And you want to use your resources as much as you can to investigate. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
And did you learn of an interview with John Skelton at Toledo St. Vincent's Hospital?
Yeah, we had learned that John had been transferred from Fulton County to St. Vincent's in Toledo. He'd been acting erratically, so they transferred him up there for further observation. We met as a team, made some decisions about what the next steps were, and ultimately determined Detective Sergeant Ed Price and Special Agent Mike Glennon would be sent to the hospital to potentially interview him and see if we could.
What did you learn from that?
During their conversations with John, he shared that he believed that the boys had been wrapped in a blanket and placed at a old schoolhouse near Kunkel, Ohio. And at this stage of our investigation, we had a plethora of law enforcement in the area, and at the police department, which was our command post. And so we dispatched personnel and myself down to 2 different schoolhouses near Kunkel, Ohio. One was I don't know if it was an old elementary school, but it had been converted into residential living. And another was more of a historic one-room style. I don't know if it was one room, but one-room style schoolhouse. We checked those areas pretty thoroughly and weren't able to find the boys.
Now let me back up just one. I want to make sure I understand. John Skelton told the team that the boys were wrapped in blankets and placed in an old schoolhouse in Kunkel, Ohio. Is that what you said?
Correct.
And so then a team was dispatched to search any schoolhouse in Kunkel, Ohio. Is that what you're saying?
Well, he said an old schoolhouse, so we identified those 2 locations as being really the only old 2 schoolhouses, and we checked them.
What'd you find?
Nothing.
What else did they learn? Did he describe a nightmare?
Well, after our initial findings, or negative findings, came back from our searches, they went back in and spoke with him again. During this time, John described having a nightmare, and within this nightmare, he describes what he thinks is Joanne Taylor, but he's unsure if it was possibly himself. And he explains that he is, I believe, is it 95% sure that the boys were in a dumpster near Holly City, Ohio. He urges the interviewers to respond and get his boys. He refers to himself being perceived as a monster. He's concerned, he expresses concern about being perceived as a child killer during the course of this interview.
And this is also when he says that he may be Joanne Taylor.
Yes, he was unsure, as he described it.
And is it true that he also drew a picture of the location on the dumpster?
He did.
Was that investigated?
Yeah, we certainly had folks in that area already, so agents went and responded to that area, checked the dumpsters, and it discovered that the dumpsters had already been dumped. Follow up with waste management company discovered that the trucks that picked up the dumpster and the dumpsters in the area went to Waste Management of Ohio, and communication with those folks. They keep track of where trucks dump things in the waste area, in the dump site, and were able to point us in a direction. The FBI's evidence recovery team sent several people out to the location and performed a search of the area that we were told that truck dumped its load. And unfortunately, we're not able to locate it.
Now, as this investigation continued, there were more search warrants done. Is that right?
Yeah, as we talk about this, we talk about it kind of step by step, but there's a lot of things happening at the same time, right? So we have search warrants going on. We're still searching electronic devices, trying to track down as much data as we can collect. It might lead us to where the boys' whereabouts are.
And this is all happening simultaneously, correct?
Yeah,
So there's a team working on search warrants, there's a team interviewing, there's a team searching. All these things are happening at the same time.
correct.
And one of the searches, did you find some internet activity regarding poison?
Yeah, the search of John Skelton's laptop showed search. I should stop. I don't recall if that particular was on his laptop or his other computer, but I do recall that a search of his computer discovered that there was a search for rat poison and can rat poison kill a person.
Did you say can rat poison kill a person?
I did.
Did you also find anything about breaking a neck or anything like that?
We found he conducted a search on the 20th of November, how to break a neck and spine, spinal cord, and cerebellum.
Was there also additional social media activity that you found?
We found a Facebook post from November 24th where he states, and I quote, "I love my wife very much. May God and Tanya forgive me."
Was there another one around on that same day, about 2.5 hours after that?
Yeah, he messaged, I don't know their, relationship in total, but a Herschel Ward, at least an acquaintance of his, said he was killing himself tonight, but right now he was fine.
Okay. Did you also find, is this also when you found out about the cafe mom and that he was actually communicating with Tanya?
Well, that's when we discovered more thoroughly the records. We were able to retrieve more of the records related to that activity.
Now, did you also end up with text messages? Did you do cell phone searches?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier that we recovered the text messages from the cell phone of the exchange between John and Tanya leading up to him his scheduled time to meet to turn the children over, in which he states, he's going to be late and gets her with this joint Taylor.
So you learned through the text messages that a text was sent from his phone to Tanya's phone saying that the kids were not with him and they were with a Joanne Taylor, correct?
Correct.
And that's the same Joanne Taylor, in your opinion, that was created by John Skelton.
Yes.
Now, after we talk, I know that it's hard to keep it because everything's happening at one time. It's hard to separate out. But now I want to talk a little bit about the searches. I understand there was quite a massive search put together. Is that accurate?
Yes, we began having local citizens and people from the area start showing up and just randomly searching city parks and areas where they thought the boys might be. And it became a little bit of a logistical challenge for us. I ended up meeting with then Fire Chief Chad Schisler. We discussed trying to create some organization to it, bring some focus to it. In addition, we received complaints about people going on private property and things like that. So, the decision was made to try to organize that, and hopefully with some of the tips that we might get about a particular area, we could deploy a lot more people in quicker time. And we had integrated with the fire department some officers from the area that would kind of help out if they saw anything suspicious or there was some concern. At our peak, I think we had about 425 volunteers that showed up for nearly a week.
You also have multiple fire departments, correct?
Yeah, we had fire agencies from all over the region. I couldn't even begin to list them now.
I know Toledo was, or I read that Toledo was involved, is that correct?
Yeah, Toledo Fire was involved as well.
Now, I'm not submitting these as evidence, but do you recognize the things that I'm holding up?
I do. Those are maps that the fire chief and I, so each morning, I would try to meet with the fire chief, and we would talk about the areas that have been searched so far. And based on the information we were developing or tips we were getting, as cell phone data came in, things like that, try to nudge them in that, in different directions. And if we didn't have anything, if I didn't have anything specific to get to him, we knew that John's phone at least had left the house and had gone down to Holiday City, Ohio, and then at some point come back. So I mentioned to the chief if we could do our best to literally search every public area, public roadway, public parks, publicly accessible locations in southwest Lenawee County, northwest Fulton County, northwest Williams County, and southeast Hillsdale County. And those are the maps we use to do that.
You recognize this?
I do.
What is it?
That was generated by the fire department. It was used to track all the volunteers, the teams they were assigned to, and many of the different search locations that they were assigned to.
You would agree there's hundreds of pages here.
It's a voluminous book.
And this is when your team and multiple volunteers, you said 425. You searched all the areas where the cell phone tower hit, is that correct?
As much as we could.
Now, at some point, there was a pastor, and the pastor is Donna Galloway. You familiar with Donna?
I am familiar.
What do you know about Donna Galloway?
Donna, I don't know if she still is, but at the time was a pastor at a local church in Morenci, and she was acquainted with Tanya
And John?
and John.
Okay. And did she come in to assist your investigative team during some interviews?
Well, one particular contact of note is John had somehow telephoned Tanya's cell number, and Donna got on the phone and spoke with him. She reported to me that during that conversation, as she was pressing John to the locations of the boys, that he mentioned, said something to the effect of, "I sent them home. Don't you understand? I sent them home."
So just so I have the wording correct, I sent them home. Don't you understand? I sent them home.
Correct.
And he's saying that to his pastor.
Correct.
What does that mean to you?
If you're asking my opinion,
I'm asking your opinion.
you're speaking to a person of faith, a person that believes in God. The impression it leaves me with is that he sent them to heaven.
He murdered them. He murdered them.
Certainly a conclusion.
So did you arrest John Skelton at some point?
Yes, we did. We consulted with the Lenawee County Prosecutor's Office. On November 30th, we made contact, as our team made contact with John in Toledo, took him into custody, and he was later extradited and brought back here to Lenawee County for prosecution for 3 counts of unlawful kidnapping.
Okay. And was he?
Unlawful imprisonment, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So he was charged with 3 counts of unlawful imprisonment.
1 count for each boy.
And on January 17th, was he interviewed at the Adrian Police Department?
He was.
And what did you learn from that?
He was interviewed by Detective Sergeant Cindy Gokenauer and Special Agent Sue Lucas. I observed the interview remotely. During the course of that interview, John, as he had done previously, the story continued to change about, the whereabouts of the boys. He ultimately acknowledged that Joanne was backstory created, and that in fact it was part of this clandestine operation to move the kids to a secret organization. What he described was that he was in a truck stop near Niles, Michigan. He was eating in the restaurant, struck up some conversation with a guy there, and out of that conversation, the guy indicated that he had connections to a secret organization that could facilitate moving the kids safely. Not long after that conversation, John said that he began receiving nondescript envelopes in the mail with instructions and paperwork regarding this organization, and a cell phone with a pre-programmed phone number in it. When the interviewers attempted to seek verification and can you provide any of that documentation or anything, he explained that the instructions were to burn materials and or return the other items that weren't burned. And this exchange apparently went on for a period of time until the boys were turned over to this organization that he identified as United Foster Outreach and Underground Sanctuaries.
Okay, so during this interview, you state that he admits that he lied. Is that correct?
Yes,
So he's a liar.
yes,
Okay. And then he tells you about an underground organization that he has zero proof exists. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And you already know that he dropped off the children's coats and toothbrushes and other items at his aunt's house the morning of November 26th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And conveniently, in this made-up story, he states, well, I had to burn everything that would have shown that any of this is true. Is that correct?
Yeah, what he didn't burn, he said he had to return. So he wouldn't have any of the items available.
So he gave you zero proof of this organization.
That's correct.
Did you ever find out any information about this organization?
No, certainly as an investigative team, we all used our available resources, databases and such to search if there's any existence of this organization, etc.
Do you believe John Skelton killed his 3 children on or about November 26, 2010?
I do.
In fact, you announced that this was a murder investigation within a couple of months of this happening. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
During your time working on this case, did you ever see any evidence or any hint that these children may be alive?
No, I'm confident they're deceased.
And are you confident that they were killed on or about November 26, 2010?
I am.
Now, one final question. When you left the Morenci Police Department, what did you do with the investigation?
One of the team members that we worked with was Lieutenant Sean Furlong from the state police. I contacted him, told him that I would be changing jobs, and I thought the best place for this case at this point was going to be in their hands. I ended up meeting, myself and Officer Hillard ended up meeting with him, and then Detective Brewer at our station. He turned over all the materials, evidence, everything related to the case
And the Detective Brewer works with the Michigan State Police, is that correct?
Correct.
I have no further questions at this time.
Ms. Knight?
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning, ma'am.
Did you ever personally meet the three children at any point prior to their disappearance?
Yeah, I was at their house one time, and I don't, off the top of my head, I don't recall specifically what it was, but I was at their house, and I believe it was Alexander was in this cool little police getup, and he was telling me how he wanted to be a police officer someday. It was a real. It stuck with me at the time, and even certainly after the incident, it stuck with me ever since.
Okay, and you stated you don't recall the reason that you would have been there at that point?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay, do you recall when that would have been in relation to the investigation starting?
I don't.
Okay.
Sorry.
And then earlier you testified about Alexander calling 911 on November 21st, 2010, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and that was because he could not find his father, John Skelton, within the home, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and was it your understanding that the children would have been with John at that point due to it being his parenting time with the children?
I can't speak specifically to what the parenting time schedule was. I'd have to review that material,
Okay,
but I can only assume that that was the case.
okay. Do you recall if at that point in time, and again, this would have been 6 days prior to the last time the boys had been seen, do you recall if both Tanya and John were residing at that home, or was it just John at that point?
I think I know the answer to that question, but I'm not as confident with it to be able to provide an answer.
Okay. May I approach? Okay, so what I just handed you has been marked as proposed exhibit S6. Does that document look familiar to you?
It does.
Okay, and can you identify that for the court?
This is a report from September 13th, 2010 that I completed regarding the incident I testified to earlier regarding John attempting to take the kids to Florida.
Okay, and is that document then an accurate representation of your investigation with regards to that call?
To my knowledge, yes.
Okay, and in that police report, what time did the call come in that day?
11 a.m.
Okay, and can you just remind us who was the caller at that point?
Tanya was the caller calling the police department asking for an officer regarding what was happening.
Okay, and what was happening, that would have been when John initially took the boys from school and headed to Florida, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and based on that report and based on your conversation with Tanya, how did she tell you that she first became aware of the fact that John had taken the boys from school?
I believe Kathy Wood, the school support staff member, notified her.
Okay, and did you ever personally speak with Kathy Wood from the school?
I have to review the report. I don't.
That you can do that, that's fine.
Karen Wood. So. Yeah, my report indicates I did, that I spoke with Karen at the elementary school in the office.
Okay, and based on your recollection or report, do you recall why Ms. Wood would have called Tanya about the children being taken from school?
Well, John had indicated that the records for the children may need to be forwarded to Florida. And that was one of the things that gave her concern that he was leaving.
Okay, so is it your understanding then that Ms. Wood didn't necessarily have to call Tanya, but she did due to the just concerning nature of the statements made to her by John that day?
That's correct.
Okay. I would move to have that exhibit admitted into evidence.
No objection.
Thank you. It may be received. Would you like it published to the bench?
I would. Thank you, sir.
I'm not quite tall enough to get that.
Was that S6?
S6.
Okay. And do you recall who the last person or people were that would have seen the boys prior to their disappearance, other than John Skelton?
My recollection is we interviewed Adam Johnson, a neighbor who had seen them, two of the boys in the backyard the day before they went missing.
Okay, so that would have been November 25th then, correct? Okay. And did this man make any statements regarding what the children were doing in the backyard specifically?
I think he just said they saw them back there playing. Just,
Okay. So nothing concerning regarding what he saw them doing in the backyard that day? Okay. And you testified that there had been that failed suicide attempt by John Skelton on November 26, 2010, which would have been the day the children had last been known to be alive, and that there was that suicide note that you testified to earlier. In your professional opinion, and based on the fact that you testified earlier that John is known to lie, do you believe that that was a real suicide attempt?
I do.
You do? Okay. Do you know how John got to the hospital that day?
He was transported by a cousin or something, if I recall.
Okay. You testified earlier that John had drove a van, correct? Just in general.
Yes.
Okay. Was that the only vehicle that you had known John to own and drive?
I recall him having a motorcycle, but the van is the only one I'm familiar with.
Okay. And earlier you testified that the van was not at the home around 5:30 a.m. based on that witness that came forward and said that they had driven by that day and on the 26th and hadn't seen the van parked in the driveway. Are you aware of if the van was at the home in the driveway on November 26, 2010 at the point when law enforcement arrived?
Well, I'm gonna back up. You said 5:30 a.m. The witness provided us that they went by about 5 a.m.
Okay.
5:30.
Okay. Was the van there later that day though when law enforcement arrived?
As part of this preparation, ma'am, I'd have to look at the case files.
Okay, that's okay.
I do want to mention, if it appears that I don't recall that specific answer, I hope the court understands that the paperwork involved in this case is significant. There's just an enormous amount of material. So if I am unable to answer specific questions like that, just please keep that.
Okay, that's okay. And it was also 15 years ago, so I think that's understandable. Do you recall if there was anything significant about the home on November 26th regarding the children's rooms when law enforcement had arrived?
No.
Okay. Did you at any point ask Mr. Skelton why the home had looked the way it looked when law enforcement arrived? Regarding like the cut wires, you know, just the home being in that disarray. Did you ever ask him why it was the way that it was?
I never asked him those questions personally. I don't recall if in the interview at Adrian Police Department, if that topic was broached or not. Most of that interview was focused on, you know, trying to gather information where the boys were at. So I don't recall that question ever being asked.
Okay. Do you recall if you ever asked at any point during your investigation what John and the boys had been doing the day before that they had last been seen? So November 25th, 2010?
Yeah, I think John indicates that they were baking, cooking or something in the home, having Thanksgiving dinner.
Okay. At what point was an Amber Alert put out for the three boys?
It's about 10:30 on Friday the 26th.
Okay. And did you personally call that Amber Alert in?
I did.
You testified that John informed law enforcement while he was at the hospital on November 26th that the boys had been wrapped in blankets and put in an old schoolhouse in Ohio. Are you aware if John was insinuating whether the boys were alive or deceased at that point?
The way it was presented suggested to me that they were deceased.
Okay. Was there any significance with Holiday City, Ohio and the Skelton family other than John making the statements at one point that the boys had been there in a dumpster?
The dumpster where it was located was nearby a hotel where John and Tanya had done some excursions there, done some overnights as a couple there.
Okay. And then regarding the statement by John that the children had been placed in that dumpster, were you under the impression that, again, he was insinuating that they were deceased at that point?
Yeah, that particular part, I've listened to that interview, and that particular portion, he's very, of all the interviews, he's very emotional, very erratic during that. And during that part of the conversation, very emphatic that the responding officers get there quickly.
Okay. So would you agree then that earlier on in the investigation, John Skelton primarily made statements to numerous people that would insinuate that he did in fact kill the 3 boys?
Can you restate that question?
Yeah. Would you agree that early on in the investigation, John Skelton had made statements to law enforcement, such as the dumpster statement, such as the boys being wrapped in blankets and placed in an old schoolhouse, that would insinuate that he had killed the 3 boys early on?
Yeah, I think those are 2 examples, but I think there's a number of things that suggest that as well.
Okay. And then it seems like later in the investigation, and to this point, John is alleging that he didn't kill the boys and that he gave them to this underground sanctuary. Would you agree with that?
Yes, John's story evolved a number of times. He did numerous interviews with the media in which he painted sometimes slightly different pictures of what he had done, the stories he'd given previously.
Okay. Are you aware if John Skelton was employed at the time that the boys went missing?
I recall he was driving truck, but in that moment, I don't want to say for sure. My best recollection is that he was not employed. He was currently.
Okay. And then you testified that John said he had to burn certain items according to this alleged organization. They told him that he had to burn certain items. Was there ever anything found burning at the home when law enforcement arrived?
No, we executed a search warrant on the property and to collect any potential evidence, and we certainly never found anything that would resemble what he was describing.
Okay. Is there anything else that you didn't have an opportunity to testify to today that you feel is important or necessary for the court to know in this matter?
I think I can think of this moment.
Okay, I have nothing further. Thank you.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Any reason we should not thank and excuse Chief Weeks?
Please.
Yes.
Thank you for your time and your testimony. You are excused. All right. Would you like to take a break or would you like to go to your next witness?
I would like to take a short break.
Ms. Day?
I agree with that.
All right, very well. We'll take a brief recess then.